I failed? But how? I studied all night. It's officially over. My parents are gonna kill me. Okay. It's cool. I'll just see what I did wrong. And wait a second. How the hell am I supposed to know what I got wrong if there's nothing here? Feels like a you problem. Okay, class, today we're going to talk about the difference between a hype and never. This probably wouldn't actually happen in a school. At least I hope not. But this is what a lot of learning can feel like. You're trying your best to learn something, but when you don't quite get it, you can't really pinpoint what you're doing wrong and what you need to work on. This is something known as a wicked environment. And no, I'm not referring to your bathroom after your dad's done with it. Though that is a wicked environment, but for a totally different reason. A wicked learning environment is when feedback is often delayed, just straight up wrong, or if you're really lucky, both. This might be easier to explain if I also explain what a kind learning environment is. As you may have guessed, a kind learning environment is just the exact opposite of what a wicked learning environment is. The feedback you receive is instant and accurate, but there's a lot more to it than that. An example of a kind learning environment is something like golf. With golf, it's really easy to see what you've done wrong. When you take a shot, it either goes too far left or too far right, or it doesn't go anywhere because you completely missed the ball. This is an example of instant and accurate feedback. You can see exactly what you've done wrong and what you need to do to correct it. At this point, I should just hit the ball and leave the rest to fate. This brings us on to another component of a kind learning environment: practice. Back to golf. If I practice hitting the ball straight, I might not be able to get it at first, but if I keep practicing and adjust based on what I'm doing wrong, I'll eventually get better. And one day I'll be able to hit more good shots than bad. I'm not going to get into it too much, but this is where I believe the 10,000 hours rule comes from. If you practice a skill for a total of 10,000 hours, you will, according to the rule, have reached mastery. And with a kind learning environment, this can be a more simple task. This is because within kind learning environments, there are patterns that repeat themselves over and over and over and over. So it's really easy to know what you need to do because not a lot's going to change. Unless you're planning to play on like Mars or something, then you might have to account for like gravity and stuff, but I'm going to assume we're not doing that. So what makes a wicked environment a more difficult place to learn? Let me use being a gamer as an example. When you lose a game, there are a lot of different factors that could have contributed to it. In Fortnite, if you get eliminated, it could be because you didn't pick up the right weapons, you made too much noise, or maybe like me, you're just, bad. And like we said before, because there's so many different factors, it can make learning a bit of a headache. And on top of that, there's not as many easily recognizable patterns. Going back to Fortnite, because why not? Don't judge me. You can't control people you end up coming up against. Like those crazy 8-year-olds who can build like 10-story apartment buildings in 2 seconds and then snipe you in midair while doing like a 360 spin before you've even figured out how to place a wall. Definitely not speaking from experience, by the way. You might also end up with different weapons that require different strategies and have different levels of effectiveness. So you can't just say, oh, I'm going to get really good at sniping. Because then what happens when one of those crazy 8-year-olds shows up? They call it a wicked environment and they don't call it that for nothing. And I have even more good news. Wicked learning environments are a lot more common than kind ones. Most things in life don't have the same simple rules as a game of golf. There are a lot of different components that make it difficult to try and focus on one, and sometimes there aren't specific rules that you should follow. Like, could you imagine if entrepreneurs just followed the rules? You need to choose what you think will serve you and your goals the best. One way to do this is through self-reflection. In kind learning environments, it's easy to get instant feedback, which means it's usually easier to know what your next move should be. With wicked environments, not so easy, but not impossible. But you'll have to reflect on what you've done and decide what you think the main issue is. Doesn't mean you'll always be right, but at least you have something to focus on. And if your focus is directed at the wrong thing, you'll soon figure that out and adjust. You may not always move in a straight line towards your goal, but at least you'll be moving towards it. Doesn't have to be you either. You can seek feedback from your mentors, parents, friends, teachers, or even the internet. Anyway, that's me done. If you want to learn more about kind and wicked learning environments and don't mind reading, I recommend reading Range. It explains these things in a lot more detail than I ever could. And honestly, I don't really want to explain it in that much detail because I want to keep things light and fun. And if you find it interesting and want to learn more, there's loads of resources that you can utilize. But if you have any questions, I'd love to try my best to answer them in the comments. Anyway, until next time, deuces.